get
So I'll
there
just
here.
tell you a little bit about myself. I am here in Columbus, and I am what's called a Merrill Financial Solutions Advisor. I work with clients exclusively on our online Merrill Edge platform. And I basically help clients with everything from their very first savings account all the way through retirement planning and investing. So um, then the reason that I volunteer for Better Money Habits is because I really believe in like sharing knowledge, and that the more you know about something, then the easier it is for you to begin to do things that are make more informed choices. And if our choices can be informed, then there'll be good choices for us. A few things about me. My husband and I have 3 kids, 2 cats, and a rabbit. And I like to paint and decorate cakes. So um, that's just a little about me.
All right. All right. And I am Chris Garrity, that ugly guy right there. I am a financial advisor slash portfolio advisor at Merrill. So very similar role to Rochelle. There's a few little nuances, but very similar. We help our clients achieve their financial goals in the best way possible. And I think it's very important that knowledge, one of the reasons why I do this is because I feel knowledge is power. The more you know about the decisions that you can make, the better decisions you will make. Hopefully, that's the idea, right? Um, and I just enjoy educating folks on financial topics that matter to them or that are top of mind to them, because not everybody has the same um, situations going on, or if they do, maybe they're in a different phase or a different stage of their life. So those come with different goals and way to tackle those goals. So a little bit about me is I love everything Buckeyes, big fan. I know that my audience is primarily in Columbus, so if you're a Michigan fan, you're in the wrong spot. Sorry, just can't. I don't know. I love playing golf, and one crazy little fact about me is when at a very young age, I learned how to wiggle my ears, which is it's kind of just a little nuance that I've learned, and that's my son Reese, our family, and then my daughter Olivia, and our dog Primo. So that is it.
So we're going to be talking about basically 2 parts today: debt and savings. So both of these involve setting and achieving goals, right? So I'll go ahead and take on the first part, which is debt, right? So Chris, can you go to the next slide? I'm not,
Oh yeah,
yeah,
sorry. There we go.
there you go.
So yeah, well,
So we're going to talk about like setting financial goals. Do we want to pay off a debt? Do we want to pay for a car, buy a home, or do we rent? And then the next slide.
mhm.
So there's really little steps that we can take to get there. And a lot of times I think that what stops us from really looking at our financial life is that we can be overwhelmed and we think, things are already tight, or I've never been able to do a budget, or I just don't know where to start. And really, we can start with very small steps. And by doing that, we're able to put in a dent in our debt. We're able to make a savings plan that's simple, track our spending so that we're not kind of uh, unconsciously spending money that we might be better off saving. And, sort of holding ourselves accountable. I mean, you hear about this in so many things that you want to do with your life. Have an accountability partner, somebody that goes on a walk with you, or that you meet at the gym, somebody that you're reading books with, right? There's all sorts of things that we want to do in our life. And I was just telling my 11-year-old the other day, I said, you're a lot like me, hon. You like to have somebody do chores with you. It's not that he's lazy, he just doesn't like doing chores by himself. And I'm sort of the same way. I think it goes faster and it's more fun when you have more people together. So next slide, please.
Mhm.
Chris, is the saving portion first? The slides are kind of,
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think it's a little it might be a little jumbled up, but I can
ah,
take this slide for sure.
okay.
So part of the savings is not just saving what you're saving for, but the vehicles in which you can save. This is essentially in a savings account, you have a few different options. Um, when it comes to savings, you've got a savings account, and then you can look at other ways, i.e., money market accounts, and then certificates of deposit. Okay, and what are fundamentally the differences? A savings account is really just it's a bank account that allows you to put cash in and save it. Um, one of the downsides or the upside to a savings account is your money is very very liquid. It's readily available, and you can pull from it at any time. There are some restrictions on how many withdrawals you can take out of a savings account in a given period. It's usually I think it's 5 or 6, and or it may have been suspended because of COVID, but the government limits the amount of money coming out of a savings account. Okay. Now, there are other forms of savings that are a little bit more liquid, i.e., when we think of liquid money, we think of cash, we think of checking account money, savings account money, and then there are other ways through money market accounts and certificates of deposit. Okay. Money market accounts are literally ways to put your money in. It's almost like a savings account, but there may be even more restrictions to how accessible the money is. And then, of course, your certificates of deposit is nothing more than you giving the bank your money, and in return for that, they keep it and they make money on for themselves on it, but for a certain period of time, whether that be 3 months, 6 months, 9, a year, and it goes on. But what you're doing is you're loaning them your money, and in return, they're going to pay you money back in interest. And at the end of that term, you're going to get all that initial principal back. So the initial money that you gave, you'll get that back. And during that time frame, you will get interest payments. So some of the pros to a savings account, obviously the money's very, very liquid. Um, it's the con to a savings account is generally in our low interest rate environment, savings accounts don't pay hardly anything. I think 1/100th of a percentage point is the annual rate on a savings account, which is super super low. Now, money market accounts, the pro to a money market account is that it is easier to access than a CD. It is potentially lower interest rates than a CD usually, and it usually requires a minimum balance. Okay. A certificate of deposit or CD generally has higher interest rates, and that comes with maturity ranges of, so a 3 month CD might not have as good of a interest rate than maybe let's say a 1 year CD. So it is a little bit harder to access, and it usually requires a minimum balance. When we say harder to access, we mean your money needs to stay in there for that period of time, whatever it is. If it's a 3 month CD, it's got to stay in there for 3 months. If it's a bank CD, you have to, if you want your money prior to that, then there's a penalty for that, generally speaking. So a little bit more into the weeds, but for the most part, the savings account, your money market accounts, and your certificates of deposits. There are a bunch of other ways to save, and there's pros and cons to those. But for the sake of simplicity and keeping it higher level, we'll stick with that. So now back to you, Rochelle.
So one of the main debts that probably many of us carry would be a car. Now, back when I was a kid in the 80s, my dad taught me how to buy a car, and it was cash is king, never buy new, and never tell them that you're going to do a loan, right? But times have really changed. You know, when I was a kid, interest rates on a mortgage were 11%, right? And now our interest rates are so low that you really need to think about whether or not it's beneficial to maybe try getting a new car directly at the dealership, because sometimes they will have 0% financing or 1.9% financing. So there's a couple of things that I would say would be first when we're looking at cars. Number one, you should know your credit score, right? There's so many different ways nowadays that you get your credit score. But know what your credit score is, know if there's any erroneous reports on your credit, get that free annual credit report, make sure it's accurate, and try to know what your credit score is. If your credit score is high enough, that's when you're going to qualify for those 0% rates and the 1.9% rates. Think about whether or not you want to make a down payment. Sometimes you need to, sometimes you don't. So if you go to your bank and get a car loan, say you've decided you're going to buy a used car and that's what's best for you at this time, then your bank is probably going to have a best rate for you, much better than financing at the dealership for a used vehicle. And so you can just borrow a set amount of money and then walk into the dealership and negotiate that way. Think about the loan term. Again, if we're borrowing for practically zero, then it may be beneficial to have that longer term if your car will last. Now, I'm not saying get into a 7-year car loan or something like that, but a 5-year car loan, if you're buying a brand new vehicle or even just a vehicle that's a few years old but low mileage, 5-year vehicle may be worthwhile because you would be able to pay it off and still get use out of the car, right? And then secondly, we say, do we want to lease or do we want to buy? And this is a personal thing. It's a personal thing, but it also makes sense to think about, why would we lease a vehicle? So leasing is basically renting. You got to pay a down payment, and then you have a monthly payment. You have to make sure that you do the scheduled maintenance, and you got to keep it under a certain number of miles. But you can also, if you want to carry a car payment forever, you can also just keep leasing and leasing and leasing every few years and get a brand new car every few years. So some people like that idea, but you really have to look at the cost effectiveness of leasing, and you really have to make sure that it's something that's right for you financially. And I would say that the person to sit down and talk to about that would be someone at your bank, not the car dealership, right? That way you can kind of, Merrill's approach and Bank of America, we're very holistic. Remember I said I do everything from your first savings account through retirement planning. We're holistic. We don't look at any one thing isolated by itself. And so it's important to know the whole financial picture so that what we're doing is going to be best for everything that you're doing, right? When you buy a car, usually the car payment is higher than on a lease. But at the end of the term, that car is yours. And that car could last a long time. My husband and I, our last car was we bought it in 2009. It was a 2006. And we just donated it to YFC Wheels, Youth for Christ Ministry, for, they have a car lot over on the west side, I think. Anyway, so that was 2009 to 2021. And at 52 years old, he finally got his first brand new car. right? So it's just your individual preferences, your individual financial situation. So again, don't be afraid to talk to someone at your bank about this and what would be best for you. And hopefully wherever you're banking has sort of that same attitude as Bank of America. We're holistic. We're looking at all of your needs, not just this one product. Any questions about cars? No? Okay. So one of the things that I'll also say here is when you're looking at a car, you want to research it. There is so much on the internet today about how much you should be paying for a car and how much it should be worth. Also begin to understand that your negotiations are very different now than they were 10, 20 years ago. So you don't necessarily get to walk into the dealership and get thousands of dollars off the sticker price, because every dealership out there is competing online where all of their prices are public. No, we talked about knowing your needs and your budget, but also know what incentives you may qualify for. Sometimes there's ex-military incentives. Sometimes there's oh, I don't know, just they always post them on the website for the car, right? Again, make a down payment, maybe not, right? Apply for the loan and close the deal, right? So I would just encourage you, as I said, walk through this with someone. You don't have to do it by yourself. And then the next slide. Now we're kind of moving on to our next debt item, right? And this would be renting or buying. And when we think about renting, a lot of people will say, oh, you're just throwing your rent away. But the truth of it is renting gives you a better avenue sometimes for savings in a way, if you're not renting a very expensive place. You don't have the maintenance costs of the unit that you live in. That's the responsibility of the landlord. So the furnace goes out, the landlord's the one who repairs it. The payments for rent are usually less than a home. Now, freedom, here it says you may not be able to update or personalize. And then if you need to move, it'll be likely easier as in the future. I kind of look at those things as like the same thing. I kind of think you have a little bit of freedom there. If it turns out you don't like the place you're renting, or you want to upgrade and have a bigger apartment, or downgrade and have a smaller apartment, you've got a lot of freedom there. If you need to adjust in your budget, you're not stuck with a house payment that you would have to pay thousands of dollars to refinance. You can go find an apartment that fits whatever your budget needs. So I'm not necessarily sure that renting is always a bad choice. On the flip side, buying is an investment. And there's a reason why it's maybe included in the American dream, right? Because when you buy a home, you own this little piece of land. And almost all the time, unless you're in a community with a homeowners association, you could do just about anything you want to that land and that building. You may have to get a permit, you may have to do something like that, but that's your home. Now, when you think about buying, you have to recognize you're going to be responsible for any maintenance, you're responsible for insurance, and you're responsible for property taxes. And so it's very important when you're thinking to figure out how much house can I afford? You need to know the property taxes, and you need to get an estimate from an insurance agent about what the insurance would be on this. And if you need to move, it can be cumbersome, especially if the market is down. Think back 2008, 2009, 2010. Those were hard times to have to sell your house and move on. Next slide, please, Chris. So extra costs and renting, right? So usually when you're going to rent a place, you're going to have to put down a security deposit, and you're probably going to have to pay the first month's rent, moving costs, and your monthly bills. They say a broker or finder's fee. I don't know about you guys. I've never hired somebody to help me find a house or an apartment to rent. So I guess if you needed help with that, you'd have that fee too. Next slide, please. So when we're renting a house or an apartment, again, we want to have a realistic budget. Sometimes they say that your housing costs it ranges. I mean, this was quite a while ago. They said that it should be no more than 1/3 of your income. What do you need and what don't you need? And read your lease. There's lots of fine print, and maybe fine print, it bothers you. Maybe you find that contracts and things aren't the things that you like to read or are interested in, but you can't not read your lease. And if it's so cumbersome that it's difficult to understand, there's lots of places out there that can help you read through. Housing development charities, things like this will help you reading through a lease, reading through a mortgage agreement, something like that. So again, don't be afraid to ask for help. Everybody is usually pretty willing to help you make the best decision for your circumstances. And then the next slide, please. I think we've already touched on this. When we're buying a home, there are closing costs associated. Like we talked about, additional expenses like the property taxes. And there's a misconception out there that you have to have a 20% down payment. Sometimes you do, but look around. Get a mortgage officer at your bank. Get a real estate agent. Talk to them. There's nothing wrong with doing it piecemeal, right? You can go to a real estate agent and say, hey, I'm looking to buy a home in the next year or two. What do you recommend buyers do, right, to prepare for buying a home? Go to a mortgage officer the next time you're in the bank. Stop by his desk. What do you recommend people do? And the 30-year mortgage being the best option, it really depends on your situation. Do you know 100% for sure that you're going to be moving in 5 years? Maybe a 7-year adjustable rate mortgage would be best for you. So it's important that, again, reach out and find someone that can help you through that. Deciding to buy, that's our next slide, Chris. So this is an example of the budget. So now you see they say mortgages should be 25% of your income. So years ago, it was 1/3, but now it's 25%, right? I think this is going to really vary for each person. Some of the things, though, that you really want to make sure of is that you're paying yourself as well. And Chris is going to get into that when we move over to savings. But there's questions of like, how do I how do I save or how do I allocate my budget if I'm already running to the wire? If I'm already down to my bottom line and I don't have any extra, right? And so there's different ways that we can track our spending. Most banks now have a spending and budget application within the banking apps that they have or the website that they have that will break down for you where you're spending your money. And if your top payee out of your checking account is Amazon, there might be some things that you really want to take a hard look at. But a budget shouldn't be scary to you. It should be something where, just like I said in the beginning, the more knowledge and information you have, the better choices that you can make. If you don't know your budget, if you don't know where you're spending your money, if you have to really think hard about how much your electric bill is, because you can't quite remember and it's automatically deducted, you need to get yourself familiarized with your budget. Next slide. So when we're wanting to buy a home, if you say, yeah, I'm renting now, but I do want to buy a home in the near future, prepare your finances, right? Look at what you're earning, look at what you're spending, look at that credit score, look at the credit report, and make sure that this is really something that you're prepared to do. Again, discuss the loan options with a loan officer. Narrow down, where do you want to buy a home? What do you want that home to look like? Apply for a mortgage, get a pre-approval letter before you even go out looking, because you're going to be competing against other buyers that have their pre-approval letter in hand. And so if a seller has to wait on you to get pre-approved for your mortgage, then they may choose, well, I'm not going to wait. I've already got an offer and it's good to go. And then your real estate agent would help you, close that deal. I would say this as a caveat. We bought our home seller to buyer direct. We did not use a real estate agent. In the new world of Zillow, you see a lot more for sale by owners. And a real estate agent would like to tell you that the buyer doesn't pay real estate fees. But I can also tell you that the seller doesn't want to pay them either. And typically they will try to sell their house for more in order to pay the real estate agent their commission. And so don't think that you're not paying for that real estate agent, because it's coming in somewhere in those mortgage documents. Could be in the guise of the price of the house, other things like that. So there's other people out there that can help you with buyer to seller sales. You would definitely, or seller to buyer sales, but you would definitely want to make sure that you had an attorney that would be able to write up a real estate agreement for you if you did that. Okay. So again, set your savings goals, know what your goals are, know what your needs are, know what your budget are. And then if you're planning a big purchase, take the time and put the effort and energy into doing your homework on that. Chris, did you want to take this one?
Yeah, I think what we'll do here is we'll breeze through this one. I don't want to glaze over it, but I think Rochelle, you've hit on budgeting and quite a bit, and then we can just, I've done a little bit of the banking basics on that one slide that I'd presented. So let's move right into it. What you'll learn here is how to manage that debt, which Rochelle spoke about a little bit. Banking basics, what an emergency fund should cover, and how to budget. So when we talk about budgeting, Obviously, there's both debt and your assets and savings. So we need to know both sides of the coin, if you will. Very quickly, some of the do's and don'ts of debt. Prioritize paying off your debt. Pay on time and stick to your spending plan. Okay, so we want to make sure that you're prioritizing your debt, meaning that you're paying off higher interest rate cards first, or in some cases, it may make sense to just, if you got two credit cards and one has like a decent rate, but you don't have a whole lot of money on that card, maybe it makes sense to get rid of the balance on that card so you can literally check it off the box and you can say, okay, I had two cards, credit cards with a balance, and now I only have one, and now I'm going to focus. You can really train your focus on that one existing card. Some of the things, this isn't an all-encompassing list, but some of the three big ones is you don't want to pay the bare minimum, right? Because when balances carry over from statement cycles, you do get charged interest. One thing to note here with credit cards, if you're paying your balance off in full each month, which is part of that stick to a spending plan, you actually aren't charged interest. So it's only when a balance carries over to a subsequent statement cycle is when you'll get charged with interest. So that's something to consider when you're spending. Know that, hey, I know I'm going to be able to pay if I charge X amount of money on the credit card, I know that I'm going to have money to pay it off toward the end of the statement cycle, and I'll just pay it in full. And then it's almost as if you just paid in cash. Um, don't forget about your accounts. Don't stick your head in the sand and think, oh, if I just forget about it, it'll just go away, because all that's going to do is just pile up, and it's going to make that hole a lot bigger, a lot deeper to get out of, right? Um, and then, of course, we all know this. I think it's common sense. Shop till you drop. Like you've got to be mindful of the fact that it is a credit card and you're borrowing the bank's money, and in turn they're charging you to borrow their money. So it's not your money, but it is your credit worthiness that can be impacted if you just spend, or don't pay your payments on time, or don't pay them at all. So be very, very mindful of that. An illustration here on the right lets you know minimum payment. If you pay a minimum payment on a credit card, $100 for the first month, your total interest that you would pay years to repay that could be 23 plus years, and you end up spending 553, almost $5,400 in total interest. If you just pay an extra $75 a month, you could whatever the said balance is, and I don't know where that's at, but it's not on here. But anyway, you can see the difference there. The difference is quite substantial, and the time frame in which you're paying it, and you're paying $75, more a month. So debt repayment strategies. So there's a couple of ways to pay off this debt. One is the snowball method, where you pay the lowest balances first, and then you carry that money over to the next card that you're going to continue, and then you pay that off, and all of the payments that went to that first card that is now paid off go to the second card, and then when that's paid off, the payments from the two previous cards go to the third one, and so on. Hopefully you don't have more than two or three cards, but the snowball effect is literally just paying that low balance first. And then the high rate method is tackling the debt on the card that has the highest interest rate first. Because that's ultimately the card that's costing you the most money when it comes to paying interest. Now, there are times where you could use like a hybrid method, where you can there's something to be said about the psychology of paying off your debt, and I hit on this a little bit earlier. But the snowball effect, being able to pay a debt off and literally removing that debt from your balance sheet is a great is great psychologically to say, okay, this is awesome. I've got this taken care of. But if you're balancing cards that have different, generally speaking, credit cards aren't, I mean, unless a lot of time has gone by and your credit worthiness or your credit score is substantially different, generally speaking, you're going to have about the same um, interest rate on credit cards if you have multiple ones, unless you've got one like you're in college and you got a Capital One card and your rate was like 18%, but now that you're older and you've got better credit, maybe it's, I don't know, maybe it's 7, 8, 9, whatever the case may be. But nonetheless, you can utilize these methods either one by one, using snowball, using high rate method, or using a hybrid approach, whatever your preference is. So kind of leaving the debt portion of things and moving into the different types of accounts. And I hit on this earlier too, but your checking account is literally to fund your day-to-day household operations, if you will. Um, access cash for things that you need for cash, pay your bills from, things like that. A savings account would be designed for more, I would say, more short, medium, long-term goals. This savings account is a great way to start saving incrementally for your down payment on a home if you're looking for that, or if you're looking to move into a upgrade to a better apartment that you'd like to rent, and maybe you need a little bit more for a security deposit. You can utilize the savings accounts. Savings accounts there are other avenues to save outside of savings accounts. So if you're speaking more long-term goals, maybe you want to look at some like investment accounts so you can grow your money a little bit faster over time. Different ways to pay. So of course, there's always different ways to pay for your bills, cash or pay for anything that you might want, that Starbucks coffee, if you will. Cash, your debit card, which is essentially electronic cash that comes out of your checking account, and then of course credit. So some of the pros, you can avoid debt by paying in cash. Um, you can one of the downsides to cash is that if you lose cash, it's gone. Um, Possession is 9/10 of the law. So if you drop a $20 bill outside of out your car window as you're going through the Starbucks parking lot, it's like somebody can literally take it, and it's like, how do you can't really prove that that's your cash, right? A debit card is electronic. It keeps things a little bit more safe, as far as how as far as accessibility to your funds. Um, One of the cons to that is that obviously it's a debit card, so you can spend, and you don't want to spend to the point where you overdraft your checking account. Because generally speaking, debit cards pull from the cash that's sitting in your checking account. Okay. And then of course, credit. It's safe and easy way to build your credit by using credit cards correctly, and it likely offers fraud protection, which is something that you will not get for cash. It's very, very likely that you get it with a debit card too. I know at Bank of America, we are very, very mindful of fraud, being mindful of fraudulent cases that come across debit and credit card transactions. So, any questions there on any of the slides that I've covered thus far? No? Okay. What you might need to budget for. Emergencies, paying down existing debt, short-term goals, retirement, and education. Okay, these are the 5 big ones that you'll see more often than not. Short emergencies, you should have, and we'll get it into the next slide, but you'll want to have a portion of your income set aside So just in case something happens and you know, you don't have access to a paycheck, maybe you got injured at work or whatever and you can't work, you don't want to be stuck with zero income coming in the short run. So paying down existing debt, interest expenses, you don't want that to erode your your spending power or your savings. Um, you want to budget for short-term goals so you can afford fun things like vacations, weddings, um, you know, weekend trips, if you will. And of course, retirement. I mean, we all want to, at some point in our lives, we want to say, okay, I'm done working, and now I'd like to live off of the wealth that I've generated over the last 30, 40, 50 years. So, um, and then of course education. If you want to, it's a huge investment, and oftentimes you don't know what the return on that investment is until you've already spent the money and you've already got your degree and you go out into the workforce, and then you realize that, great, this is a lucrative career that I'm embarking on, or it's maybe not. Case in point, my undergraduate degree is in social psychology, and the only way to get a job in that field was simply for me to continue education into a master's degree or a doctoral program, and I wasn't interested in that. I did get my master's degree, but it was in business. So we just so you want to save some money, but aside, set money aside for education, whether it's for you or it can even be kids or grandkids, and there's vehicles in which you can do that. So you can help your subsequent generations, help fund their education and get them off to a more solid start. So emergency savings, generally three months. If you're a sizable family, 6 to 9 months might be a better way to approach it. But you want these expenses to cover your day-to-day costs. So to cover rent or to cover a mortgage, to cover food, your insurance for cars and house, and even if a lot of people may not know this. I mean, I hope most people do, but even if you rent, it's always good to have insurance, not necessarily homeowners insurance, but renters insurance, so that the items inside of your apartment or condo are covered if there was a catastrophic incident, and it would, you would lose some of your personal items in your home. So obviously debt repayment too, because if you don't have a job, you still have to continue to make those payments, and you certainly don't want to use the credit card to live on, because that creates a snowball effect in the opposite direction that we're intending. So then of course transportation, gas in the car, tickets for the MTS, or the bus, or whatever the case may be, and then personal expenses as well. So a checklist on how to put a spending plan in place. Know your net income. Okay, your net income is the money you bring home after Uncle Sam, the federal government, the state government, the city government, and the school district. If you live in a school district and have to pay school district tax, you want to make sure you've got that all set up, and make sure that you know exactly what you have at the end of all of that to spend, or for your debts, and then to also save. You want to make a plan. Obviously, you want to put together a budget. A budget's nothing more than a spreadsheet that has money coming in, which are your assets, and then money going out, which is your liabilities. And that process is what we call cash flow. So how is your cash flowing? Is it coming in and then it's all going out? Is it coming in and some of it's staying so you can save it, and a portion is going out to pay your bills, things like that? And part of understanding your cash flow is tracking your spending, knowing knowing how essential are your spending habits? Are you spending a lot on, obviously you're spending on your needs, but are you spending more on wants than maybe you should be? And that allows you to identify what are my needs and my wants, and where can I cut back on those wants so that I have more for what I need now and in the future. Adjust your habits if needed, and check up on your progress. This allows you to, a budget allows you to put, check on your progress, right? I mean, and you know exactly what's going on from a transactional standpoint. Um, and then once you realize, hey, I'm spending $15 every three, I'm spending $30 a week on coffees at Starbucks. I mean, hey, wow, if I trim that back to to half that, I got some extra cash in my pocket. So um, moving on to the plan, and I had mentioned this earlier, but this is nothing more than a spreadsheet. Spending categories there, your planned spending, and then your actual spending. And this is your income, how your take home pay, which would be that net income, and then any additional household take home pay that you may have. So this is all the money coming in, and the red is all the stuff that's going out. And then you have hopefully, when it's all said and done, you have a net savings where you'll have money that'll remain on your budget, and then you can put it into a savings account or a retirement account or what have you. Some online tools that'll help you stay vigilant with your budgeting and your spending habits would be mint.com, Budget Plus, and then Bucksford. So those are to consider there. Okay. Takeaways here: be responsible with your credit. Don't go crazy with credit. Credit is a great thing if you have it and you use it responsibly. You're generally looked at by financial institutions as credit worthy, and they're more likely to considering you for a loan or credit down the line. Work to repay your debt. Don't just let it go, but be very diligent, and be very strategic in how you pay down your debt. Um, Learn and apply the banking basics. So you know your basics are your checking, your savings account, your debit card, the difference between cash, debit, credit, things like that. And then of course that budget and that spreadsheet that'll help you obtain a solid budget for yourself. Knowing those numbers. And moving on, developing your budget, prioritizing your savings. I think we've really knocked. I think we've hit on this a few times. So just
Hey, Chris, can we stop here at this slide for just a second?
yeah, sure. Hmm.
Yeah, I just want to share a couple of things with you. Why my spending plan's not working, right? Again, I think that one of the most difficult things about looking at a budget is when you already feel like you're budgeted to the max, right? And Chris mentioned the Starbucks coffees, and I saw Jerry's eyes raise a little bit when he said you're spending $30 on coffee, right? Um, but one of the things that I want to remind you about is what you always hear, like self-care, right? What are you doing for your self-care? And sometimes it's very, very depressing when you just have one or two little luxuries that you allow yourself a month, and maybe that's the only thing left for you to cut out, right?
Yeah.
And so it might be a Starbucks coffee, or it might get your nails done. And so, like, for example, I went for a special occasion with my daughter, and we got gel nail polish done. And that manicure was like $40, right? Well, I really, really liked it. And I really liked how long it lasted. But I knew there was no way I was going to be paying $40 every 2 weeks to have a manicure done. And what I ended up doing was I found out on Amazon that I could buy the light and I could buy the nail polish and I could do it myself. Now, I had to put out a little money in the beginning to get myself started. I had to spend some money on the polishes, which were more expensive. The light was like $20, right? So I had to buy some things in the beginning, but it didn't total more than a manicure did with tip, right? And then I could paint my nails whenever I wanted to, and they would last a long time. And now I have added so many different gel nail polishes to my Amazon wish list. I'm not kidding you. I actually have one of those like fake nail things with all of the color swatches on them because I can't keep track of what all my colors are without it. Because I've been doing this for several years now, and it's a great little gift for somebody to buy for me for Mother's Day or for a stocking stuffer or something like that. And so I never go to the salon anymore. And in fact, when I get together with my sister and our two daughters, we have spa day and I do everybody's nails for them. So we're not talking about you can't have any luxury. Maybe that coffee is your luxury and you're like, Rashad, I love my Starbucks. It's what gets me through the grocery store, right? Okay, what about this? Maybe you go ahead, you spend some money on getting yourself a whipped cream machine, just like they have. My husband bought me one because, again, like coffee's my thing. And so he bought me the whipped cream thing dispenser. And now all I have to do is buy a bottle of heavy cream. I can get some caramel flavored coffee and some caramel syrup from the Sunday aisle in the grocery store. And I can make myself a caramel latte with whipped cream on it anytime I want at home. And I can even take it with me on the road. So we're not saying to you, you can't ever enjoy any luxury again, but think about how you might be able to enjoy that luxury differently by doing it at home. And another good tip as well, look at who your suppliers are. If you're on Verizon for your cell phone, I'm telling you right now, T-Mobile is cheaper and they're just as good. And I cut out Verizon from my life about 4 years ago, and I've never been happier. So in fact, T-Mobile just upgraded us. You've been probably seeing the TV commercials. They just upgraded us to unlimited data for 4 lines at no increased charge, all 5G. And there's no way you get that at Verizon for the price that I'm paying. My average line is $30. So, that's another place you can look. Don't just assume, well, Time Warner's the only place I can get cable from, or what are they called now? Spectrum. They're the only places I can get cable from. We were under that assumption. We were a new housing development. We called up WOW Cable, and they were like, yeah, how many people live there now? And we're like, well, there's like 70 houses here now. Boom, they came and they ran the cable line, and we were their first customer in that development. So don't think that you can't make changes to those things that are like your utilities even. So I just I gave you my little buy button tip. But yeah, so just a little tip there.
Yeah, I like that. Well, thanks for sharing those,
Mhm.
Rochelle. The emergency fund, I know we're over our time, and I don't want to just stop, so we'll breeze through this particular slide. But these are some of the things to consider, the components of your emergency fund for 3, 6, 9 months, whatever you feel is appropriate, but at least 3 months. So your rent, the groceries, utilities, any loans that you may have, student loans or otherwise, other loans, and then your total amount. And then it's nothing more than a basic math problem. This is how much I need to live off of each month. Therefore, I multiply it by the number of months that the number of months of a cushion that I want. And there you go. So, jumpstart your emergency fund. The 4 takeaways here: know your numbers, know what you need to have in what you're doing each month, or what you need each month to live off of, and make sure that you plan accordingly to save for 3, 6, 9 months of the for those funds. Pick something and cut it out. Make it routine, and don't be tempted. So I know it's easier said than done, but when you I'm a firm believer that the humans we're creatures of habit, and if you make it a routine to cut certain things out, and make it a routine to walk by the impulse buy and don't stop, just keep them legs moving. Those are things that will go a long way, and that, for your budgeting and for your saving and spending. Here we, if you have debt and you still need to save, what do I do? Do I pay down debt first, or do I save? Generally speaking, in most cases, you would want to pay down your debt and then save, because anything that you're saving, if you're saving it in a savings account, it's not going to outpace the amount of money that the bank is charging you for that debt that you have. So you'll want to take a hard look at that, but it's not set in stone. Everybody's situation is different. So so you want to consider, do, do you have any, the debt that you do have, if any. You also want to consider your emergency fund, and you want to consider your other goals or needs. So, and then last but not least, starting to save for retirement. When we talk about this, when I talk about this with my clients, the common denominator here is time. Time is what really will allow you to to generate wealth for your future self. So really, if you're saving now, great. If you're not saving for and saving to pay your future self to not have to work, I would strongly encourage you to reconsider and reach out to a professional that can start planning, help you plan and strategize with you, to ensure that you're meeting those long-term retirement goals that you may be thinking about, but you just don't know how to start or where to start. So. And then to wrap things up here, review your bills and your budget. So knowing your numbers, boost your emergency savings, or your emergency fund, or start it if you have not yet. Find new ways to save. So those impulse buys, cutting back on those cutting back on those wants, and then decide how to allocate your savings. Okay, is my savings going to high interest credit card debt? Is it going? Is it that extra savings? Is it going toward my retirement account, or is it a combination of the two? A split between debt, paying down your debt, and continuing to save. So with that, I will open it up for questions.
Uh,
So yeah.
Chris, I think Terry wanted to share a little bit about utility bills and stuff.
Oh yeah.
Terry, did you have some ideas you wanted to share with the group?
I was just piggybacking on your comment with regard to saving on your Verizon bill, etc. I have a side hustle where I can help the ladies that are interested if they want to contact me as it relates to saving on not only the cell phone bill, but electric and gas. And I was just saying that if you need some help with that, I'd be happy to help you guys out. And then I have one question for you, and that is the emergency fund. Is that being kept in a savings account or a checking account, or where do you keep the emergency fund? I just started reading a Dave Ramsey thingy, and I don't even recall where he was even saying to put it. So what do you guys suggest
Yeah.
holding that emergency fund?
Well, as you remember Chris mentioning, savings accounts are regulated by the federal government to restrict how often you can make a withdrawal from them. So checking accounts, the banks, sometimes they make restrictions like, oh, you can only write 10 checks a month, but you can use your debit card unlimited. But checking accounts, you can take money in and out all day long, however, hundreds of times a month. But savings accounts, you cannot do that. it's not necessarily the dollar amount that you can't take out, but you can only maybe like have 4 or 6 withdrawals a month. And if you have over that, then there's like a charge, right? Because that's just the federal regulation put around savings. So by putting your emergency savings in the savings account, it helps you better because you're not able to just go in there and take out all this money all the time that you want. So when we're building up our emergency savings, you want to put it in there. God help you if you're having more than 4 emergencies a month, right? Because when we talk about emergencies, we're talking about your car breaks down, you lost your job and you need income for your expenses. Remember, we're not looking at just income replacement, we're really looking at expenses. So you're not looking to replace your full income. You're looking to just pay those monthly expenses. So if that happens to you, you may want to do a large transfer over to your checking of, okay, my monthly expenses are $1,500 for the month. I'm moving over $1,500 from the savings account now because I've lost my job, right? So that's where I would put that emergency savings, is in a savings account.
Thank you. Thank you. You triggered one other question, if it's okay.
Yeah.
Savings accounts, like you mentioned, don't offer very much, in terms of interest. In fact, you have to put a whole bunch of money in to get the kind of interest that many are looking for. So it also led me back to your conversation about the car. They're different now buying a car. And so some of these options at the lower interest rates might make sense in 2021. My question is what you just said, is that true with the COVID? Because I have a ding, one ding on my credit right now because of COVID. And so my score is lower than it was last year, this time, or somewhere last year sometime. So the leasing, or what makes sense with the impact on people's credit ratings with regard to COVID, a number of people are finding themselves in a situation with it. Would you still say that statement would be true?
So usually those interest rates, you have to have at least a 720 on your credit score to get those kinds of interest rates.
Right.
Chris, I haven't heard much about any sort of COVID relief on credit scores. Have you?
No, but I think that, I mean, it can be, in hindsight, it may not be feasible, but generally speaking, I know that a lot of financial institutions, if for whatever, I don't know what your Terry, your personal, what that particular incident was on your credit report, and don't really, in fact, I mean, don't really need to know, but the oftentimes just reaching out to the institutions and saying, hey, I can't, this is, they can work with you to keep you in good standing. And then that doesn't eliminate, it may eliminate some of the reporting to the credit agencies and things like that. But again, I don't know if that would, for anything coming up, that may be impacting
And if
your
it's
credit.
something like a 30-day late or a 60-day late or something, those don't stay on there forever and ever and ever. Not even like, like a bankruptcy stays on there 7 to 11 years or something. But I think those 30-day lates and 60 days lates, I think those come off sooner. So I would encourage you to get your annual credit report. You can try writing the credit bureaus a letter as well, asking them to remove that, explaining it was a COVID scenario. But they are notoriously difficult to work with. And a lot of times if you have to use special legalese to get them to do something, to remove something. So I would just say, if it's a small 30-day late, 60-day late, something like that. Just try to go ahead and continue with good payment, repayment, and hopefully in 6 months or so, you'll see that improved.
Thank you both for your responses.
Anybody else?
Oh. Okay, I think that might cover it, huh?
I think it does.
So, I mean, it's been great. I've
Yeah.
had it was my pleasure to present to you ladies today. If you have questions, you can always reach out to Dress for Success, and they can get you. If you have a question about your personal, like a more personalized question, and you'd like to talk to one of us too about that, you're more than welcome to reach out. So.
Thank you, Chris and Rochelle, for your time. Thank you, ladies, for attending today's Power Hour. Everyone have a safe and healthy weekend. Get out and enjoy the sun.
Yes.
Stay hydrated.
Yeah.
Right?
That's right. That's right. Take care, ladies. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
you guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye.